Alright, y'all. Hopefully everyone's week is going well so far, and if not, then there's always tomorrow. Even though yesterday was Self Care Tuesday, let's talk about DBT for a second because I'm still on a mental health advocacy kick, and I feel like I didn't know how much it, DBT, would help me at the time, but it has served as the bedrock for my mental health. For those who don't know, DBT stands for dialectic behavioral therapy. Originally developed by Marshall Linehan in the late 80s, it served as a way to better treat borderline personality disorder. That is not me, but it is okay if it is you. It is a form of CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. Fast forward a couple of decades, and just like medication, it began being used off label for depression, anxiety, etc., because of its tenets and the way treatment is structured. So originally it was used to better treat borderline personality disorder because experiencing extreme swings in their emotions, seeing the world in black and white shades, and seeming to always be jumping from one crisis to another. Because few people understand such reactions, most of all their own family and a childhood that emphasized invalidation, they don't have any methods for coping with these sudden, intense surges of emotion. DBT is a method for teaching skills that will help in this task. Right from Psych Central, and I will put the author right there. So, those three tenets. Support, it's the first one. It helps to build on one's strength and bolster self-esteem and self-competency. The second, cognitive. Helps to identify thoughts and behaviors, beliefs, assumptions that are making life harder. And the third one, collaborative. Learning to work out relationships and conflict with therapists, group work, doing homework assignments, etc. So, individual and group therapy are huge components of it. The individual therapy focuses on four things: mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, distress tolerance, and emotional regulation. Individual sessions in DBT, according to Psych Central, also focus on decreasing and dealing with post-traumatic stress responses from previous trauma in a person's life, and helping enhance their own self-respect and self-image. Psych Central. And the group therapy, again, Psych Central. Generally 2.5 hours a session, which is led by a trained DBT therapist. In these weekly group therapy sessions, people learn skills from one of four different modules: interpersonal effectiveness, distress tolerance, reality, acceptance skills, emotional regulation, and mindfulness, again. Now, that's a lot of technical speaking, a lot of mumbo jumbo, and it's not mumbo jumbo. It's really beautiful in its own way. But with all that said, at the time I didn't think much of what I went through with DBT. I mean, my therapist was like, hey, I was just taught by someone herself, and would you like to be a part of this group therapy that I'm starting up here? And I was like, sure, why not? I mean, at that point I was like, let's stick everything to the wall and see what works. I was still having different crises points at that point in my life and trying to get my life back on track. I just did not know how, and I needed a bit of help. In fact, one of the things I remember about the sessions was the collaborative aspect, both group and individually, but mainly individually. Here's an example, and maybe I'm sure they do this in other forms of therapy, but this probably was not related specifically to DBT, but anyways, I digress. So I have horrible phone anxiety. Making phone calls is just the worst. I have to brace myself. And to make a long story short, I ended up driving halfway across the country because I didn't want to answer the phone one time. Well, by the middle of the trip, there were a lot of phone calls. It's a longer story, but we'll save that for another episode. I feel crooked. Am I crooked? You'll tell me if I'm crooked. Anyways. But because of this, I just couldn't bring myself to make some very much needed medical appointments and phone calls. In one session in particular, we went to her office and I made an appointment because really part of the treatment was taking care of base needs first. No self-harm agreement, start working on physical health. I mean, we couldn't really work on anything else if my physical well-being wasn't stabilized. Now, she didn't make the phone call for me, but she sat with me while I made the phone call and appointment. And then afterwards we talked about all the emotions that popped up with my anxiety. Yeah, that's where I was at one point in my life. That's why I'm uniquely qualified to be a duchess. I still get anxiety when the phone rings, but oftentimes I just let it go to voicemail, so just take that bit of information with you if you give me a phone call. Anyways, in another session, she had me bring in my mom because there were things that needed to be resolved and I needed to express how I felt. And here's what I mean by being supported. It wasn't what I had to say in hindsight because I can't remember too much of the actual details, but the fact that my mom was willing to drive up and she was willing to sit with me in on this session and hear what I had to say and listen, it spoke volumes. It's the whole acknowledging another person's pain and at the very least saying, I know you're in pain and I don't know how I can help, but I want to help. There was another instance with my father where it just let me know we may not always agree, but I love you and I want you here in this world living. Which brings me to the whole point of all this really is radical acceptance. Because to me it was a big part of DBT and one of my biggest takeaways in emotionally heightened situations. And I alluded to it in a previous episode on talking about meeting my shadow self unexpectedly and uninvited. That was just a couple of weeks ago. But radical acceptance in a nutshell is it simply means that you're acknowledging reality. You're acknowledging what happened or what's currently happening. Because fighting reality only intensifies our emotional reaction. Again, guess where this came from? Psych Central. Radical acceptance has been helpful to me in so many situations, from the grief the past 2 years and processing the loss of my brother and Sammy, to processing past traumas, to helping me deal with the whole process of transitioning and the dysphoria that rears its ugly head at times. For me, it's just giving a name to what a lot of older people have come to realize is probably the best way to deal with situations. Accept the current reality and then work out a plan. To keep focusing on how it should or could be different or what someone else could have done only increases the suffering and it isn't actively working towards a solution. It's saying, radical acceptance is saying, I see this situation, let's find some solutions. So, all that said, I got super preachy, and I kind of glossed over a lot of what my DBT experience was. And getting into the groups, my therapist agreed with me that I was there for different reasons than a lot of other people in the group, but I still found the group skills helpful in working out things and seeing how other people approach things. And not only that, but one of the things I really loved about DBT was incorporating mindfulness and grounding exercises when I did feel overwhelmed that I still carry with me. And I remember telling Eddie one time when he was having a panic attack as we were 10,000 feet in the mountains and the height was giving him anxiety and all that. And as I'm driving, I'm like, okay, focus on your 5 senses. What do you feel? What do you see? What do you taste? What do you hear? And then I saw a big lake at the top of the mountain and I was like, all right, what I want you to do is go jump in that because it'll shock your senses. Big takeaway. Sometimes you'll catch me doing this because that's one of the little grounding things, but I think we all do that. But it's something that I can focus on and say, hey, this grounds me. So if you ever see me speaking in public and I'm doing that, well, that's number one. Public speaking terrifies me, which is why I'm doing this. But also, yeah, mindfulness. There was one other point I wanted to make, but I really can't remember it in either way. I got super preachy today. But really, I am a strong advocate for better mental health because of how much it has helped my life. I mean, seriously, 13 years ago, I felt paralyzed with fear and anxiety and somewhat agoraphobic, actually. Honestly, I didn't have a plan because I didn't plan on making it past my 21st birthday. So everything after that point was just like, I'm lost in the wilderness, what am I doing? Am I really supposed to be here? Anyways, almost all of my technical stuff today came from Psych Central, and I'll be quoting them at the end. And here's what I recommend. I recommend you finding a therapist and then reading some self-help articles because, yes, it is nice to help ourselves, but sometimes it is also really nice to have someone who's trained in it and trusting professionals to guide the experience. Not to say that you should trust everybody out there. It takes a minute to find the therapist that vibes with you, but you'll know it when you find it. And there are many, many, many good ones out there. And stick with the process. Really, that's all I have for today, as if that wasn't a lot. As always, keep bearing the lightness of being. I love you all, and until next time.